to the evening news from the home. Good evening, I'm your host David O'Reilly. In our election coverage this week, we headed south to the Global Economic Summit in Kerry, where Tedros Ghebreyesus of the WHO was challenged by the Killarney Declaration, a statement on behalf of the Irish people, read out by Eddie Hobbs. And we hear from a number of European candidates supporting the declaration, and also hear the counter-narrative to globalism from Fiona Foley of Hold the Line. After the attempted assassination of the Slovakian leader last week, the President of Iran, Ebrahim Raisi, and Foreign Minister Amir Abdullahian were killed as their helicopter came down in Azerbaijan. We discussed this with our Foreign Affairs correspondent, Gearóid O'Cólmáin, who is in Moldova. Back home, we follow summer's progress in nature with Tara, and we get an update on all the weather for the weekend. On a bright May Monday, the home headed down to the Global Economic Summit at the Europe Hotel Killarney. The three-day Global Economic Forum hosted more than 400 attendees discussing climate change, energy, sustainability and technology. A message from our previous Taoiseach had read, "We look forward to welcoming some of the world's most distinguished business leaders, policymakers and thinkers to Ireland to the Global Economic Summit in 2024 and are continuing to see the impact of the summit globally in the years ahead." Protesters focused on WHO Director General Tedros Ghebreyesus as member states finalise agreement on the global pandemic treaty. European election candidates Michael Leahy of the Irish Freedom Party and independents Una McGurk, John Waters and Jerry Waters, amongst others, came out to support Eddie Hobbs, who unveiled the Killarney Declaration in defence of sovereign rights and personal freedom.
I'm here to support Eddie Hobbs, the great Eddie Hobbs, and his Killarney Declaration. This is truly a historic moment, David. You know, it reminds me of what it must have been like for Pádraig Pearse when he read the proclamation outside the GPO. It's very, very significant. I support everything that Eddie has said about the WHO, about the proposed pandemic treaty, and about the Director General of the WHO. And I would urge everybody to listen to that declaration whenever they get a chance to do so.
You've a legal background, you've participated in the institutions of the state. Is your faith in the institutions a little bit shaken by what you're seeing today?
Yes, indeed. I have a lot of experience because I was a barrister for a long time, practiced as a barrister in a variety of legal disciplines, civil and criminal, and I sat on a number of tribunals, etc. But yes, I think my faith in the institutions has definitely been shaken since COVID, since 2020. As you know, I spoke out, I spoke truth to power, and this did not go down well with the political establishment, who cancelled me, and mainstream media censored me, and I effectively and ultimately lost my career in the process. A lot of people may not realise that I'm running because it's unlikely I will be interviewed on mainstream media, which I think is very unfortunate, not just for me, but for all the independent candidates. If one just deals with the Director General himself, Tedros Ghebreyesus, there are serious concerns that have been raised about this man. I mean, he was actually reported to the International Criminal Court in respect of crimes against humanity, and he is wanted in his own country of Ethiopia for crimes against humanity. And it is extraordinary that he's in this position and that he's being wined and dined and feted by governments all over the world, including our own. And this man has serious questions to answer. And if these agreements, if this pandemic treaty or agreement and the international health regulations are passed and agreed upon and signed by the various states who are members of the WHO, it will give this man enormous power so that he can declare a pandemic emergency effectively on a whim. You know, we need people who are transparent and open and accountable about their pasts to have these very powerful positions, and it's not appropriate that somebody like him is in this position. As you know, of course, the WHO in itself is a non-elected, unaccountable body. So this is the body that wants to take power onto itself to have total control over global health. At the moment, under the rules of the WHO, the International Health Regulations, it's Rule 55. The final text of any agreement that is to be agreed upon by any of the parties, which by the way is due literally in the next week, must be given to all the states parties at least 4 months before they vote on it, which means that the 27th of May is the date when the negotiations and the signing of the agreements will take place in Geneva, which means that all of the states parties to the WHO agreement should have received all the documentation, the final text of the agreed amendments and the agreed treaty proposals on the 27th of January last, obviously so that they could consider them, bring them to the attention of their respective parliaments and the people, to have a public debate. None of this was done. So the WHO are in breach of their own agreement. And if Ireland signs up to this agreement, within the next 10 days, Ireland will be showing to the world that it no longer follows the rule of law and that it will be engaging in a violation of this an international agreement to which they are bound. So it is imperative that this agreement is not signed, and I'll be doing a video within the next day or two urging the Oireachtas to bring a motion, an urgent motion, to ensure that the Minister for Health, Donnelly, or any of his officials do not sign any documents on our behalf until such time as these issues are considered, and until such time as everyone, not just the Irish, but every country in the world has at least 4 months to consider all these issues.
It's Midland Northwest. It's a pretty big area, 1.8 million, as is yours, pretty much. There are people you cannot get to. It's a physical impossibility to get to 1.8 million people. So it has to be done by proxy.
Coming from a medical background, you must have a lot of concerns, so many concerns that you've decided to run for the European elections. What are the concerns about this event that you have? What has motivated you to come and to run for election?
Well, the reality of it is, to talk about the WHO in terms of any type of sanity is ridiculous. It is a crazy organisation, and the people who advocate and justify its existence are quite out of touch with what's going on. It is a corrupt, dishonest and useless organisation that has one purpose and one purpose only, and that is to bring in a totalitarian control of the people, as they try to do with the vaccines, the COVID. I was a GP for 40 years. I knew with absolute certainty that there was no virus worthy of the lockdowns, the maskings, the social distancing. I knew for a fact, given 40 years of winter flus and that. I refused to go along with it. I refused to go along with the PCR testing, and lost my career, as did Una, purely and simply because we chose to tell the truth and go against the agenda. And I was totally ignored by the mass media. I wouldn't accept the concept that early intervention was important. I refused to go along with the concept of ivermectin and that, because I thought, how can you cure something if you can't diagnose it? And if the diagnosis is on the basis of the PCR test, how can you cure it?
At a time when the world is looking for a health organisation which represents them fairly and is accountable, what are the problems you see in terms of those things?
Well, the World Health Organisation is not about health at all. It's about power. It's to think that in some way or other the World Health Organisation represents health is ridiculous. As does the Irish Medical Council no longer represents health per se. It represents vested interests pushing an agenda. And so in effect, we're not going to get any sort of fairness or any decency or any honesty from the World Health Organisation, or for that matter, the Irish Medical Council or the Department of Health or the ICGP or any of the organisations that so-called represent doctors now.
You're running for office. What else can we do about this?
Well, people have to take a stand, and they've got to take a stand at whatever level they can. In both Una and I's case, we are taking a stand at a European level. Now, whether we get in or not is in the lap of the gods. But I would do it for, quite apart from the getting in, I would do it to get a platform so that I can actually speak the truth as I see it.
As a first step, we need to ensure that our government or any officials or any representative or the head of any delegation sent by Ireland to Geneva does not sign anything, any agreement whatsoever, or any treaty or any resolution in the next few weeks with the WHO in Geneva. It's imperative that there is a delay of at least 4 months initiated, and I think we're going to have to get the Dáil or the Oireachtas to vote on that, to bring a motion to ensure that that takes place so that there can be proper consideration of this issue. In 2022, for example, Minister for Health Stephen Donnelly, in response to a question by TD Matty McGrath, said that he was in the process of getting the Attorney General's advice on this issue. Where is it? Why haven't we had the Attorney General's advice on this hugely important issue which could have serious ramifications? We know what happened in the March the 8th referendum when they withheld the Attorney General's advice from us and advice from senior departmental officials, and it all came out afterwards under a Freedom of Information Act request. We don't want information coming out afterwards under a Freedom of Information Act request. We want the information coming out now. We need the advices of the Attorney General to be made available to all of us regarding the constitutional ramifications of signing up to this treaty on behalf of the Irish people. Send a letter to their TDs demanding this.
You are not welcome in this country. You have no business being here. Clear off back wherever you came from, your bathroom in China.
What are you doing here, Fiona? Can you tell us just for the viewers?
Hold the Line itself is just a thing that's going on all over the country for a few years now, and we basically are handing out information. But today is a special day really, because Tedros, the Director General of the WHO, and other elites, in other words the big knobs, they're holding a global summit at the moment in the Europe Hotel. But we, the Irish people, do not accept this, because the whole thing about these amendments to the health regulations is silence is consent. Yes. So if we are silent as a people, they are taking that as our consent, and I'm not going to be silent.
What you're doing here is reaching out to the public with your message.
Yeah, absolutely. The public, they don't know because they haven't been told. They're listening to RTE, they're listening to BBC, they're listening to all these bought out people. Hold the Line is all about an information thing. We're doing it in a nice, gentle way. We have a few election candidates with us, European election candidates. We also have local candidates here. It's so important to get these people. I mean, the Irish people is just so important to get people over in Europe, because I think it's about 70% of our laws are made by Europe. So this is all. The information campaign that the Hold the Line is doing is all about that.
You're coming from the science profession. You understand a lot about this. So what would be your concerns from a scientific point of view?
I actually have a master's in biopharmaceutical science, but that's not what I'm involved in now. I know how they make these things. This vaccine that came out in the COVID-19 vaccine wasn't a vaccine like people think a little baby gets the injection. No, this is a completely new technology, RNA technology. Basically, it was a human experiment, a global human experiment.
And that seems to be what you're educating people here about, is globalism, is it?
It's exactly that, and that's what all these people up there in that hotel, that's what they are. And the difference between us outside, even the guard said to us to go behind the barricades, and you know, all these people in here, and this I think it was about 3,000 a ticket to get into it, you know, and they're all in there making decisions for us. No, thank you. We can make our own decisions. We don't need you. We don't need the WHO. We don't need the UN. We don't need these globalists trying to morph us into a big blob of humanity. And how dare they try and crush us?
It's a great day here in Killarney. Do you feel the day was a success?
Absolutely a success. I'm confident that we are on the winning side, and not only that, but we are going to win. We have it. We have it. I know it's a struggle, I know it's a war, but we have it. We're on the right side, and we are the majority, not them.
After the attempted assassination of the Slovakian leader last week, the president of Iran, Ebrahim Raisi, and Foreign Minister Amir Abdullahian were killed in a helicopter accident. To discuss this, we go over to our Foreign Affairs correspondent, Gearóid O'Cólmáin, who is in the Moldovan capital attending the Chisinau Forum. The President of the Islamic Republic of Iran, Ebrahim Raisi, and Foreign Minister Amir Abdullahian were killed this week in a helicopter accident. Gearóid, you met Mr. Raisi in 2018 in Tehran. What impact have these deaths had in Iran?
Well, there's been a huge turnout for his funeral in Tehran. This leader was controversial in many respects, but he was definitely very popular in Iran. I think that aspect is usually ignored in the Western press because they're more interested in pursuing geopolitical objectives, which involve oversimplification and demonization of countries deemed to be on the US terror list. The Islamic Republic of Iran, under his watch, contrary to what most people believe, was actually promoting freedom of speech in many respects. A lot of things that were banned in the West could be said in Tehran, for example. The West likes to talk about freedom of speech and liberty and so on, but there are many things you're not allowed to talk about in Europe and the United States that you could talk about in Tehran. So what Raisi was doing essentially is inviting people to Tehran for debate and discussion. So I joined people, former directors of the CIA, the US State Department, writers, journalists from all over the world to discuss US foreign policy, to discuss the Middle East. And these were very fruitful debates and discussions that we had in Tehran. So that's the first thing to be said. That was my experience of Raisi's Tehran. Now, I've been going to Iran for many years, so there was quite a difference in tone, I think, under his leadership from the previous government. So the impact is obviously for the Iranians. This is quite traumatic because this is the second major leader they've lost in recent years. The assassination of General Qasem Soleimani, who was a national hero in Iran because of the strategies he devised to defeat the Islamic State and Al Qaeda in Syria. His loss was a major tragedy, I would say, for Iran. And for many people who see Iran as being a major player in the resistance against the occupation of Palestine, this is a major blow, obviously. Now, it must also be said that Iran, while it is playing an important role in the Middle East, supporting the resistance against the occupation in Palestine, that does not necessarily mean that Iran is on board on other key issues affecting people all over the world. So, for example, during the lockdown, Iran was quite draconian in the lockdown. There was even debate there of forced vaccination. Ebrahim Raisi made no contribution whatsoever to opening any kind of debate about that, and was just as authoritarian and tyrannical as any other leader in the world. So we shouldn't have any illusions either. There were also major failings, I would say, during his leadership, particularly mass immigration problem in Iran. The Iranians are a huge segment of the population are complaining that they have too many Afghans coming in. The crime rate is going up, and people in Iran are talking about population replacement, that the Raisi government was essentially replacing Iranians with foreigners. So this is a debate also that is occurring in Iran, and these are major failures, I would say, of his leadership. Nonetheless, I think the liberal debate, and I referred to this in my recent article on Substack and the Spirit of Post on Substack, that the liberal judgment of Iran is always extremely simplistic. They always use the argument of women's rights, for example. They never ask delegates from Saudi Arabia this question, where women are beheaded in public. So they always bring up the question of women. Now, in Iran, most of the top university positions are held by women. There are women engineers, women dominate in medicine. They dominate in many, many professional fields. Yes, they have a dress code, but the dress code is something that, if we think back to Europe at the turn of the 20th century, most women actually in many countries in Europe wore veils when they went out in public, and our own attitude to dress code and to the body has evolved so much that we think it perfectly normal and acceptable for a man to dress up as a woman and go in to libraries and teach sexual perversion to small children, and nobody seems to have a problem with that in the West, in so-called liberty and liberalism. But in Iran, you can't actually do that. They don't have transvestites in Iran. But they do have a dress code which is based on their interpretation of how a man and a woman should dress according to the religious laws of Islam, which is, I would say, supported by the majority of people in Iran, whether one likes it or not. I'm not condoning it because I'm not a Muslim, but it is part of their culture, and this is something that is never highlighted in the West. We have no problem with transvestism in the West and perversion, but we do have a problem with countries that insist on certain rules based on, an essential view of what a man and a woman is. So I made that point in my article. I think it's important just to it's an important corrective to the kind of nonsense that is spewed out in the Western press when we talk about countries that are geopolitical rivals or enemies or designated as terrorists. On that conference I attended, the man who invited me to the conference was a former, he's dead now, he died tragically a couple of years ago, but he was a filmmaker, very well known in Iran. And, he had a great admiration for Jesus Christ. He made a film about the Muslim view of Jesus Christ, which was quite extraordinary thing for its time. And he got a lot of criticism in the Muslim world, but he was, he wanted this kind of dialogue with Christians. He wanted to show Christians that, Muslims do, while they don't understand Jesus Christ in the Christian sense, they nonetheless appreciate, admire, and love him. And that, that he wanted Europeans and Americans to know this. And these are the kind of people. He was very close to President Raisi. So the title of those conferences was New Horizons. And so it was really about trying to create new horizons of debate and discussion, and try to deepen our understanding of the difference between cultures. And in Western so-called multicultural society, it's ironic that there is really no appreciation whatsoever for different cultures. And so these conferences were quite eclectic. They brought people from the left and the right, and it was this. So from my perspective, this is something very positive to say about the Iranian president in that regard.
And as you say, you're joining us from the Chisinau Forum in Moldova. And can you briefly tell us what this international conference is about?
Well, this is a conference which convened by Yuri Rashka, the former Prime Minister of Moldova, and he's a good friend of mine. And I actually met him at a conference in Tehran, and so partly thanks to the Iranians that this conference is happening now in Europe. And this is a conference which is bringing writers, intellectuals from all over the world to discuss the current situation, the growing global technocracy, and to discuss possible solutions and how we can organize and to better understand what we're facing. And as the challenges, as we face many new challenges, for example, like the pandemic treaty, which will be coming up shortly. So it's an emerging think tank, I would say, which is bringing a lot of people together and is creating new possibilities for resistance and international understanding. And
Gearóid, in a separate issue, the Taoiseach Simon Harris, along with the leaders of Norway and Spain, recently made moves to recognise the state of Palestine. What's your thoughts on this development, and in what light will the international community view Ireland now?
Well, it's about time. It's good. I mean, it's always good when a state stands up to the Zionist entity. The Zionist entity may punish Ireland for that. There may be repercussions. They are capable of just about anything. Nothing is beyond. There's nothing that they would not contemplate. But I would say that it is obviously very well received in the Islamic world. In Iran, there's a lot of talk about this. I don't obviously think the Irish government's heart is in this. There is, I think this is more about a different type of discourse that they are fashioning, whereby on the one hand you have sort of Bambi Thug and Satanism and LGBT and all that kind of stuff, and on the other side, support for Palestine, which has really got nothing to do with Western liberal values, because the Palestinians are not liberal at all. They're very traditional. They have big families. They are very religious. Not just the Muslims, but Palestinian Christians, Palestinian Catholics are very Catholic, and of course they're always forgotten by the Catholic community in the West, and they are really disgusted with the way in which Catholics in Europe have sided with the genocidal Zionist regime against them. So there is no depth to Irish foreign policy. There is no vision. This is very much, I think, the Irish government wanting to be the avant-garde of wokeism. And unfortunately, they've stuck in the Palestinian cause with wokeism. And so, for example, recently in the BBC, they invited a transvestite. I just mentioned transvestism, but they got a transvestite to basically come on and talk about the Palestinians. So this is a form of humiliation for the Palestinian people when you have those kind of people supporting you, instead of serious people who are not mentally ill. So there's a very sinister attempt to associate the Palestinian cause with nut jobs and social misfits, and that only actually strengthens the Zionist argument, because then they can say, look, those pro-Palestinian people are nutters. Look at us, we're just trying to defend ourselves and so on. So in a way, that's kind of my overall view of the Irish government's involvement here. I don't see anything genuinely progressive in the strict sense of that term here in terms of finding a solution to the conflict in the Middle East. I think this is sort of wokest opportunism on behalf of the Irish government.
Welcome to the weather with the hum. Let's have a look at the weather forecast for the weekend and upcoming week. Today we'll see largely dry conditions across the country. The best of any sunshine will be in the southwest, with a little patchy rain expected in the east and the north. Temperatures will range from 12 to 16 degrees Celsius, with light northwest to westerly winds. Friday night will be largely dry with clear spells. However, it will be cloudier over the north and the east, with some showers developing over Ulster and North Leinster. Expect lowest temperatures between 6 to 10 degrees Celsius in light variable winds. Saturday will be a cloudy day with a spell of rain gradually tracking northeastwards from Munster. It will be mildest across Ulster, where it could stay largely dry until the evening. Highest temperatures will be between 11 to 15 degrees Celsius with mostly moderate southeasterly winds. Rain will continue to track northeastwards across the country on Saturday night, followed by clear spells and showers. expect lowest temperatures of 8 to 11 degrees Celsius in light southerly winds. Now on Sunday, we'll have a mix of cloud and some sunny spells with scattered outbreaks of showery rain. Temperatures will range from 13 to 16 degrees Celsius with light to moderate westerly winds. And showers will continue overnight on Sunday, with some clear spells, and lowest temperatures will be between 5 to 9 degrees Celsius in light to moderate westerly winds. And looking ahead to next week, it will turn more unsettled with spells of rain expected across the country. Out in the woods, you will find a deep serenity that can help you escape the stress of life. In Ireland, we are deeply connected to the natural world in our music, dance and oral traditions. Even the letters of our ancient script of Om are thought to be named for our native trees. The fauna, as well as the flora, is soaking up the seasonal blessings. The Irish for daisy is nóinín, agus sin é focail na seachtaine. Thank you all for tuning in. That wraps up your weather forecast. Have a lovely weekend and see you next week. Back to the studio.
So, to round up this evening's bulletin, with 2 weeks to go to election day for the European and locals, we heard from candidates and protesters who gathered at the Global Economic Summit. And it was a dangerous fortnight for national leaders, with Slovakian Premier still recovering from his serious wounds. The President of Iran, Ebrahim Raisi, and Foreign Minister Amir Abdullahian were killed in a helicopter accident, which we discussed with Foreign Affairs correspondent Gearóid O'Cólmáin. We took a look at nature in summertime with Tara and got all the weather for the coming weekend. I'm your host, David O'Reilly, wishing you a great weekend, and we hope you'll join us all again next week with The Hum. Gearóid O'Cólmáin.